In today's episode, we're going to talk about some straight line winds and a lesson I learned from those. And we're also going to talk about roots and branches and trees. And to finish it off, I'm going to tell you a little bit about one of the things I have always enjoyed and how we've had to adapt it, having children with autism. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Stories of Hope in Hard Times, the show that explores how people endure and even thrive in difficult times, all with God's help. I'm your host, Tamara K. Anderson. Join me on a journey to find inspiring stories of hope and wisdom learned in life's hardest moments.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Tamara's Takeaways in the Stories of Hope in Hard Times podcast. I'm your host, Tamara K. Anderson, and this week we are going to talk about my takeaways from PeggySue Wells' episode last week. And she is just unbelievable and amazing, and I am so inspired by her strength and courage as she weathered her divorce with faith and came out stronger and better and just amazing, able to pass on so many incredible lessons that whether you're divorced or not, you can apply to your life. So there was one lesson that I loved in particular that I'd love to talk about and tell you a personal story as well. And that is the fact that God is at work in even this. And I love that concept that no matter where you are in your life, if you're going through a difficult thing, whether it's being quarantined because of the coronavirus, or maybe somebody in your family has cancer or diabetes, or whatever challenges come your way, that God is at work even in that. He can take that challenge and have it turn out for your good. Now, I want to take you back in time, probably about 25 years or so. And at that point, I was preparing to be a missionary for my church, and I was doing some training. And on one particular day, I was just hanging out, and all of a sudden, this huge storm cooked up, and it was just blowing like crazy. Of course, ran inside, took cover, and in about 10 minutes, the storm was completely over. And I went back outside, and I was surprised to see the extent of the damage of the storm. And what had happened was there was a weather phenomenon called a derecho, which in Spanish means straight. Basically, it's a storm that has straight line winds. And it happened to go through Utah and the Great Basin here of the United States. And these winds were so strong. In fact, just about a mile away from where I was, they clocked the highest wind at 121 miles per hour. And so that's a lot. That's huge. I mean, that's faster and stronger than the little tornadoes and the little tornado that I experienced when my family lived in Arkansas. And so you can imagine there was extensive damage. What I noticed the most was the trees. The trees that looked beautiful and vibrant and totally fine. And you come around the corner and they are just laying flat on their side, roots tipped up. And this storm just did a number on the trees. And what's interesting about this is that the trees that withstood the storm were the trees that had sunk their roots deep into the earth. The ones that had fallen over had shallow roots. In fact, I'm looking at a picture right here of me standing by a tree, and it had shallow roots because it just hadn't been exposed to strong winds. And what's really cool is there was a study done by a bunch of scientists a number of years ago, probably 25 years ago, around the same time. And they did a study on trees that were exposed to wind versus trees that were not exposed to wind. And the trees, the little tiny saplings, the tiny trees that were exposed to wind, it did a couple of things to the trees. The first thing is it stimulated diameter growth. So it made the tree trunk build thicker and stronger. And it also sent out stronger roots. So a stronger top and stronger roots to help kind of counteract the stress that the wind created, versus a normal tree that they had in comparison where they didn't plant it in a windy environment and they just let the tree grow normally. And they compared the two, and that's what they found: stronger roots, stronger branches, because it was exposed to wind. And so as I have sat here mulling this whole idea over in my head for a couple of days now, I'd like to share with you some of the takeaways of this. I guess we could call it a little parable of the windy tree, right? Wind in the trees. And that is that every situation you face in life can be interpreted as wind in your life, a storm that hits you. And we can either look at the wind as something that's trying to uproot us, or we can look at the wind as something that is trying to give us thicker roots and thicker branches, so that when the next storm comes, we are stronger and our roots are more deep. And I love that is what PeggySue is able to now look back on her divorce and say, this gave me stronger roots. This gave me stronger branches. God was at work even in this, as she said. And that is good to remember in times like this, when maybe you're totally stressed out because you've been home. Maybe you miss seeing friends. Maybe you miss seeing family. If you're anything like me, you're just chomping on the bit to get out of this house. I had to call a friend this morning and see if she could go on a walk with me because I was stressed out. So, we have situations in our life where the stresses and strains get to us. And so what we need to do at that point is begin to build those stronger roots and branches so that we can withstand the next storm. An example of this, PeggySue gave as well, and that was, she talked a little bit about how important it was for her to help her children have that firm foundation, to be able to learn about doing Bible study and devotions and praying. And that was one thing that she really helped her children learn in their time of stress and strain. And so I'd like to compare those two things to things we can do at any time of stress or strain or life detours or wind or rains or storms, that we can sink our roots deep into prayer. We can sink our roots deep into Bible study or scripture study, because when we do those things, we're drawing on God, who is much, much stronger than any of us could possibly be. When I was a young girl, I remember my mom teaching us a little song, probably from back when I was in primary or something like that. And it was all about the wise man and the foolish man. And of course, this comes from Matthew chapter 7, where Jesus is teaching this parable, and he says, "Therefore, whosoever heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them, I will liken him unto a wise man, which built his house upon a rock. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and beat upon that house, and it fell not, for it was founded upon a rock. And every one that heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them not shall be likened unto a foolish man which built his house upon a sand. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat upon that house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it. And I love this little parable that Jesus teaches. He teaches us that he wants us to have a firm foundation. If you're a tree, he wants you to have thick roots and thick branches. If you're like you and me, he wants us to be strong and to be able to withstand the storms of life. And so every little storm he helps you get through is preparing you so that you're stronger for the next storm. So that when those 121 mile an hour winds come, you're not uprooted. You're not just a beautiful tree on the outside, but you're strong on the inside. And you may be thinking, Tamara, I don't feel very strong on the inside right now. And you know what? If you feel you're not strong, you're not alone. None of us are. None of us are strong on our own. None of us are going to build a big, strong tree on our own. In fact, if you acknowledge that you're not strong, that's probably the first step in the right direction, is knowing that you need a source stronger than you are. Because no tree is going to grow without living water. No tree is going to grow without sunshine. And we get those things from God. We get our sun, we get our light from God. And he's the one that helps make us stronger so that we can withstand these storms in life. I'd like to share with you a really, really neat quote that I found from C.S. Lewis. And this is from his book, Mere Christianity. He says, imagine yourself as a living house. God comes in to rebuild that house. At first, perhaps, you can understand what he is doing. He is getting the drains right and stopping the leaks in the roof and so on. You knew that those jobs needed doing, and so you are not surprised. But presently, he starts knocking the house about in a way that hurts abominably and does not seem to make any sense. What on earth is he up to? The explanation is that he is building quite a different house from the one you thought of. Throwing out a new wing here, putting on an extra floor there, running up towers, making courtyards. You thought you were being made into a decent little cottage. But he is building a palace. He intends to come and live in it himself. And I love the imagery of that as well, that God is making us into something much bigger and grander than you or I can ever imagine. And it doesn't end in death. We're not done at death. He's still got some work for us to do. And he's going to keep polishing and refining us until we are perfect and resurrected and beautiful. And we're palaces. We're strong trees, And I love the thought of that. But it is hard to let go and let him have that control sometimes. If you're anything like me, I have a hard time, and I've talked about this before, letting somebody else be in charge, because I like being in charge. And so that whole idea of letting go and letting God take control is hard. It's hard to do, but at the same time, we're not in control anyway. So why do we try so hard? Oh my goodness, we try and we're doing our best. And I don't think it means that we shouldn't make any goals, but when things don't turn out the way we want, trusting that God has got it figured out, that he'll help us turn this quarantine situation into something good, and something great will come of it. We'll come out of it stronger. We'll come out of it better. In fact, I saw a thread on Facebook just this last week where somebody was asking, what are some of your pandemic positives, is what she called it. And I love some of the comments that people commented below, Some people really enjoyed being able to cook more, to have time to spend time with their family, eat dinner as a family because there weren't so many activities pulling them so many ways. Um, One person loved the time to organize. Another person enjoyed playing board games. I know our family has enjoyed doing that. It's been really, really fun. One person just loves being able to hang out in sweats. Oh my goodness, that just sounds so fun. One person commented that they felt they had time to be still and know that God is God. One person said it's great not to have early alarm clocks. Another person commented it's nice not to have traffic on the roads when they're going to work in the morning. And so sometimes when we have these situations that are so hard and so challenging, it's good to pause and say, what are the positives? What are the good things in this? So we are finding those good things. I just wanted to share those quick thoughts with you today about my takeaways from Peggy Sue, that it's good to, first of all, remember God is still at work, even in this, wherever you are in your life. Number two, remember to sink your roots down deep into a foundation of prayer and scripture study and being strong with God so that you are strong. And third, to let go and let God. Let God be that wind around you to help make you stronger. Like that study of the trees, that wind right there is helping you build deeper and more firm roots in a firm foundation. It's helping you build on the rock. And that wind right there is also helping you build stronger branches. So don't be mad at the wind. It's making you strong. Don't be mad at your trials. They're making you strong. It may break you down, like C.S. Lewis said, a little bit, and you're like, what is God doing in there? What's he remodeling, for heaven's sakes? And you have to remember that your little blueprint of your life, being a little cottage, God doesn't want you to be a little cottage. He wants you to be a palace in celestial glory on high someday. And so he's going to make some little adjustments in our lives that hurt and tweak a little bit, but that are making us better and stronger. And don't forget the fourth thing. Look for the positives. Look for those pandemic positives now. Look for your life positives. What good things have come out of your trials? You may not see them right away, and you may be thinking, Tamara, there's nothing good that has come out of this particular situation in my life. But I promise you that 10, 20, 30 years from now, you'll see them. Maybe in the eternities, you'll look back and go, oh, I get it now. But they're there. So those are my four things. All right, now to the end of the Tamara's takeaways. I always teach you something fun about me. I have been a nature lover since I've been a little girl, and I love being out in nature. When I was a young girl, I loved going to girls' camp, and I loved it so much that even after I graduated from high school, I went back again to kind of oversee my sisters and go to girls' camp again. And I have some just blessedly hilarious and fun memories of going to girls' camp with my sisters who are younger than me. I have 4 sisters who are younger than me, and not all of them were at the girls' camp at the time, but that was very, very fun. When my husband and I first got married, we thought we were going to be huge campers. We got a tent, was one of our first investments. And as the children started coming and autism became a part of our life through our children, camping has not been a thing we do very well, just because we have children that already don't sleep well because of autism. And so we try to keep everybody sleeping as happy and great as possible. So we are adapting, and we've been adapting for years. For example, we've had my husband take the kids camping, all except for Nathan, and I stay home with Nathan. And that has worked out pretty well. And we've stayed in tent cabins and we've stayed in cabins. And here we are many, many moons later. And I'm excited to report that we're going to rent an RV and try camping again. Not in a tent, but a little step up so that hopefully Nathan will sleep well. And I'm going to report back to you how that goes, because that is something that we have always enjoyed. We love being out in nature, both my husband and I do. And we've tried to instill that love of nature and the national parks, state parks, in our children as well. The world is such a beautiful, beautiful place. So sometimes our loves are awesome, and sometimes they have to be adapted a little bit, and that's okay. We're going to let go and let God, even in my circumstance, and try to enjoy life to the fullest. So I'll report back to you how that went after we have our little trip coming up here soon. Anyway, that is just a new little tidbit that you can know about me and my family, and I hope you have a wonderful and blessed day. Hang on during those storms. Hey, thanks so much for listening to today's show. I know that there are many of you out there that are going through a hard time, and I hope you found things that have been useful today as you listen to the podcast. If you would like to access the show notes from today's podcast, visit my website. It is storiesofhopepodcast.com. That is where you'll find favorite quotes from today's episode and shareable memes. And those are fun because you can share them with your friends on social media. You will also find the links mentioned throughout today's episode, so you don't have to remember what those were. And also all the tips that were shared. Sometimes tips are shared so much throughout an episode you forget. What were those great things? So go to the show notes, storiesofhopepodcast.com, to look up these fantastic resources. You know, if someone kept coming to mind during today's episode, perhaps that means that you should share this with them. Maybe there was a story shared or a tip that they really, really need to hear. So go ahead and share this episode with them. May God bless you, especially if you are struggling, with hope to carry on and with the strength to keep going when things get tough. Remember to walk with Christ, and He will help bear that burden. Above all else, remember, God loves you.